What if I told you Russia just lost almost 100,000 soldiers in 6 months, for less land than the size of a small city? Putin's spring offensive wasn't just stopped. It collapsed so badly that Moscow is now losing territory for the first time in over a year. Before we break down the shocking numbers, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video, because the mainstream media is not telling you the full story. Back in January, the Kremlin walked into talks in Turkey with one demand. Ukraine must leave all of Donbas. No negotiation, no compromise, just leave. Putin believed he had the power to force it. He had nearly 600,000 soldiers spread across a front line over 1,000 kilometers long. State television was already celebrating. Generals on Moscow talk shows promised a final push. The plan was to break Ukraine in the spring. The target was Pokrovsk, then the road to Kostiantynivka, then the 4 great fortress cities that form Ukraine's defensive spine in the east. On paper, it looked unstoppable. On the ground, it became one of the most expensive military failures in modern history. According to the Institute for the Study of War, and confirmed by British and Ukrainian defense intelligence, Russia sacrificed between 90 and 100,000 men killed and wounded between December and June. That is not a typo. 100,000 men in half a year. And for what? For about 350 square kilometers of open fields and ruined villages. That is less land than the city of Malta. It means Russia lost almost 300 soldiers for every single square kilometer it took. The pace of the advance has also collapsed. Last year, Russia was gaining ground slowly but steadily. This year, that pace has dropped by more than 80%. In the Donetsk region alone, the heart of the offensive, Russia pushed forward only 53 kilometers in 6 months. It cost them more than 25,000 soldiers to do it. That is nearly 500 men for every kilometer of dirt road and tree line. This is not how you win a war. This is how you burn out an army. And the reason is simple. In front of them was something Russia could not smash through. The Ukrainians call it the fortress belt. It is not one fort. It is 4 cities linked together by high ground, factories, and prepared defenses built over 10 years. Kostiantynivka in the south, then Druzhkivka, then Kramatorsk, then Sloviansk in the north. This belt sits on a ridge. It controls all the roads. It is full of concrete basements, old mines, and artillery positions. Putin's generals promised him they would crack it by May. By June, they hadn't even touched its outer edge. Instead, they got stuck in the killing fields around Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk was supposed to be the easy win. It's a logistics hub. Take it, and you can cut Ukrainian supplies to the entire east. Russia threw everything at it. Wave after wave of infantry. Former prisoners, mobilized men from Siberia. They attacked on foot, on motorcycles, on Chinese golf carts, even on electric scooters because armored vehicles were being destroyed too fast. Ukrainian drone operators released video after video. A column of 10 men walks across a field. A drone drops a grenade. 5 fall. The rest run. 10 minutes later, another group tries the same path. The same result. Day after day. Week after week. For 6 months straight. Families in Russia started noticing. Local newspapers in far regions published dozens of obituaries on the same day. Wives posted videos asking where their husbands were. The Kremlin's story that time was on Russia's side began to fall apart, because time was now killing Russia's army. By April, the Russian command was in a panic. They realized they could not attack everywhere at once, so they started pulling elite units from quiet sectors and throwing them into the fire like a fire brigade. This is the clearest sign. An offensive is failing. The first big move was the 90th Guards Tank Division. This is one of Russia's best armored units from the Central Military District. It had about 3,000 men and dozens of tanks near Avdiivka. In early May, the entire division was ordered to drive across open roads to Pokrovsk, under constant drone surveillance. Ukrainian FPV drones hit their trucks and fuel bowsers on the highway. They arrived late, exhausted, and with fewer vehicles, and they achieved nothing. Pokrovsk still held. Worse, pulling them away left a giant hole in the southern front. Then it happened again. The Russian command took the 39th Motorized Rifle Brigade from the 68th Army Corps. These troops were holding the line near Pokrovsk and Dobropilya. They were rushed 300 kilometers south to stop a Ukrainian counterpush near Huliaipol in Zaporizhzhia. They arrived without proper artillery support, without enough drones, and were thrown straight into battle. The same story played out with Russia's most famous units. The elite 76th Airborne Division, the VDV troops Putin always shows on parades, was moved back and forth between Pokrovsk and Robotyne 3 times in 2 months. The 40th Naval Infantry Brigade from the Pacific Fleet, supposed to be an elite Marine force, was taken from Donetsk and thrown into the chaos near Velika Novosilka. You do not move your best troops around like chess pieces unless you're losing control of the board. Russia had lost the ability to hold the entire front. It could only plug one hole by opening another, and Ukraine saw it. Ukrainian commanders waited for those exact moments when Russian units were loading onto trucks. Then they struck. In late May and early June, Ukraine launched 2 small but perfectly timed counterattacks, one near Huliaipol one near Malotokmachka. They did not use large tank columns. They used what works in 2026. First, long-range drones hit Russian ammo depots 20 to 30 kilometers behind the line. Then HIMARS and Ukrainian-made drones hit command posts. Then small infantry groups of 10 to 15 men infiltrated the gaps left by the rotated Russian brigades. The result was stunning. Ukraine liberated between 9 and 12 villages. They pushed Russia back and recaptured approximately 244 square kilometers of territory. That is the first time since the Kursk operation in August 2024 that Russia has suffered a clear net territorial loss. Let that sink in. After losing 100,000 men to attack, Russia ended up with less land than it started with. Ukrainian forces got within 2 kilometers of the vital road between Huliaipol and Velika Novosilka. That road was Russia's main supply artery in the south. Now it is under constant fire control. Russian trucks cannot use it in daylight. That means thousands of Russian soldiers in that pocket are now short on food, shells, and medicine. If you're finding this valuable so far, pause for a second and subscribe. It helps us more than you know, and it ensures you don't miss the next update when the front line shifts again. This is the new way Ukraine is fighting. It is not about massive breakthroughs. It is about slowly strangling the Russian army. And the weapon doing most of the strangling is the drone. Ukraine has now built a complete drone kill chain that reaches 200 kilometers deep. First wave drones find Russian air defense. Second wave drones destroy it. Third wave hits the logistics. In June alone, Ukrainian border guard drone units systematically hunted down the nervous system of the Russian army. They destroyed 6 major radio relay antennas. When those antennas go down, Russian battalions cannot talk to each other. Tanks lose connection. Artillery batteries fire blind. Commanders scream into dead radios. They also destroyed multiple Podlet and Kasta 2E2 radars. These are the eyes of Russian air defense. They destroyed electronic warfare systems like the Shapovnik and Volna that are supposed to jam Ukrainian drones. Once those were gone, the sky became open. Then came the Sting interceptor drones, built by the Ukrainian company Wild Hornets. In one operational cycle, these small, fast interceptors shot down more than 120 Russian Shahed drones and reconnaissance UAVs. Russia was launching drone swarms at night to overwhelm air defense. Ukraine was now hunting them in the air one by one. With the air defense blind, Ukraine started hitting everything behind the lines. Fuel depots in Mariupol burned for 2 days. A train station in occupied Donetsk, used for ammo transfers, was hit. Bridges in Crimea were targeted again. Russian military bloggers admitted that supplies that used to take 6 hours to reach the front now take 2 to 3 days, if they arrive at all. An army without fuel and shells cannot attack. That is why Putin's great spring offensive died 50 kilometers away from the fortress belt. It never even reached the walls of Kostiantynivka. It bled out in the fields. The situation in the north is even worse for Moscow. Near the Oskil River in Kharkiv region, the Russian 122nd Motorized Rifle Regiment has been holding a small bridgehead for months. According to intercepted reports, that entire regiment is now down to less than 100 effective soldiers. 100 men trying to hold what a full regiment of 2,000 should hold. They are out of drones, out of mortars, and surviving on old rations. This is not an isolated case. This is happening all along the front. Russian units are at 40, 30, even 20% strength, and the Kremlin knows it. In May, a secret purge began inside the Russian Ministry of Defense. At least 3 generals responsible for the Donetsk direction were quietly removed. 2 army commanders were retired. Putin is looking for someone to blame for losing 100,000 men for nothing. But the problem is not the generals. The problem is the strategy. You cannot send men on foot against an enemy that sees everything from the sky. You cannot win a war of attrition when your losses are 3 times higher than your enemies. Russia is also running out of the people to send. In the first quarter of 2026, official Russian recruitment dropped by 20% compared to last year. Even with signing bonuses of over 2 million rubles, men are not joining. They see the videos. They see the cemeteries growing in every town. They know that a contract is a one-way ticket. To fill the gaps, military commissars are now forcing students from technical colleges and factory workers to sign contracts. This is creating quiet anger inside Russia. The most educated young men are either leaving the country or being sent to die in Donetsk. This is mortgaging Russia's future for a few meters of dirt. The equipment crisis is just as bad. Independent analysts estimate Russia has lost over 24,000 armored vehicles since 2022. Tanks, BMPs, APCs, everything. Russian factories are trying to build new T-90M tanks, but sanctions have cut off the Western chips, thermal optics, and ball bearings they need. Production has slowed to a trickle. So what is Moscow doing? They are pulling T-62 tanks from the 1960s out of storage, tanks with no modern optics, no reactive armor, and steel that drones can punch through like paper. They are sending them to the front with crews that have 2 weeks of training. Ukrainian drone pilots call them barns on tracks because they are so easy to hit. Compare that to Ukraine. With help from its partners, Ukraine is now producing and receiving tens of thousands of advanced FPV drones every month. Not just cheap quadcopters, but drones with AI targeting, night vision, and range of over 30 kilometers. Ukraine is not trying to build a bigger Soviet army. It is building a smarter army. This war is changing by the hour. If you want real analysis without the propaganda, hit that notification bell and share this with someone who still thinks Russia is winning. Faced with this disaster on the battlefield, what is Putin's response? He is reaching for the only cards he has left: fear, threats, bluffs. In the last month, Russian state TV has talked daily about the Oreshnik hypersonic missile and the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile. Dmitry Medvedev again threatened nuclear use. This is not a sign of strength. It is a sign that the conventional army has failed and they need to scare the West into stopping its aid. The other bluff is Belarus. Lukashenko has again moved some troops near the border and talked about opening a northern front. But military experts, including Ukrainian border guard officials, say this is theater. Lukashenko knows that if his army of maybe 15,000 combat-ready troops crossed the border, it would be destroyed in weeks and his regime would collapse the next day. Ukraine already has strong, flexible defensive groups watching that border, not large brigades sitting still, but mobile units ready to strike. So both threats are hollow. Let's be honest about what happened. Putin started this year demanding all of Donbass. He gathered the largest Russian force since 2022. He promised his people a victory. 6 months later, he has lost nearly 100,000 soldiers. He has failed to take Pokrovsk. He has failed to reach the fortress belt. And he has actually lost 244 square kilometers of land he already controlled in the south. This is not a stalemate. This is a slow, grinding defeat hidden behind propaganda. The central reason is that Russia is still fighting a 20th century war, while Ukraine is fighting a 21st century war. Russia believes in mass artillery, mass infantry, mass casualties. Ukraine believes in precision. Precision drones, precision strikes on logistics, precision information. Mass dies when it cannot be fed. And Ukraine has made it impossible for Russia to feed its mass. A Russian battalion needs about 20 tons of shells, fuel, and food per day to attack. If drones destroy the trucks 20 kilometers back, that battalion stops. It digs in. It becomes a target. Then another drone comes. This cycle has repeated thousands of times. Putin is now trapped. He cannot mobilize another 300,000 men without risking a political explosion at home like in 2022. He cannot produce the modern weapons his army needs. He cannot protect his logistics. And he cannot admit defeat because his entire system is built on the myth of victory. So he will do what failing leaders do. He will keep sending men forward a few hundred meters at a time, hoping something changes, but the math will not change. For every kilometer Russia takes, it loses nearly 500 men. At that rate, to take the rest of Donbass, which is about 7,000 square kilometers still under Ukrainian control, Russia would need to lose over 3 million soldiers. Russia does not have 3 million men to give. The fortress belt still stands. Kostiantynivka, Drushkivka, Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, they are still free Ukrainian cities. The men who died trying to reach them died for a fantasy drawn on a map in the Kremlin. This is the truth that the shocking casualty numbers reveal. Putin's offensive did not just end in disaster. It ended the myth that Russia can outlast Ukraine. The war of attrition has turned. It is now Russia that is being attrited, in men, in equipment, in time, and in hope. The question now is not whether Russia can take Donbass. The question is how much longer Putin can hide the scale of this disaster from his own people before the front collapses for real. What do you think? Will the Kremlin admit the failure, or will they keep throwing lives into the meat grinder until there is nothing left? Let me know in the comments below.